I don't want to work till I'm 60.
Yep.
I want to, have the option to retire by the time that I'm 50. So this particular strategy that I'm on, we need to pivot.
Yep.
And that's all about having a relationship with your financial advisor.
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, here we are back again and back on the podcast.
Andrew. Favourite time of the week. We say that week in, week out. I sound like a broken record. And you're going to say it's your favourite time of the week because you get to sit here and record with you.
Exactly right. Just because it was true last week doesn't mean that it's not true this week.
Yeah, well, you know what? You're absolutely right, Andrew. I do love this time and I do love spending time with you, but it's all about bringing value to our viewers and our listeners.
Well, today's different though, because for the first time ever in the podcast, I'm going off script.
Oh, look out.
So we've got a plan on what we're going to talk about today, and I haven't told Billy.
Here we go.
But we're not actually going to talk about what we were planning to talk about today. Because in this episode, we're going to talk about nothing. We're actually going to stand here sit here. We're going to sit here and we're going to record nothing in this episode. And we're just going to look down in a somber mood. And the reason for that is because
Here we go.
Billy's idol, Warren Buffett, has officially retired. So we are going to do a 1 hour of silence. No, well, there's some big news. There's some big news.
Yep.
So we're going to do an hour of silence. We're not going to talk about anything. We're going to stare right at the camera and we're just going to look in somber silence for Billy's hero, Warren Buffett.
I'm going to get emotional and start tearing up here. So the guy is 94 years young, right? And has decided to hand over the reins of his company, right? So there's been a succession plan in place for a long period of time. So I'm sure it's going to be in good hands. But it's the end of an era.
End of an era. And what? It was something like 20% annualized returns per year. Are just unfathomable in terms of the consistency of that business, those investments. Berkshire Hathaway has been a real, an anomaly. Doesn't begin to describe it in terms of what that business has done.
Yeah, and when you think about when we talk about compounding interest, and you tend to think about wealth creation, what he's done has been extremely true to label as an investor. That he's just received really good returns for a long period of time. So 20% is a huge number when we're talking about annualized rate of returns each and every year. But it's not like some of the stuff that you hear today about, you buy an asset, let's call it crypto. You buy an asset and it triples in price in 2 months' time and away you go. This is pure investing over a long period of time. I think this, I'm going to butcher it, but the number is he has achieved a rate of, in terms of his wealth creation, 99% of his wealth creation was after his 60th birthday, I think the number is.
Wow.
Just absolutely phenomenal. So hat off to the guy. I think he's definitely earned, putting his feet up. If that's what he's going to do, I'm not sure. But,
And his legacy will continue on in the 360 Money Matters podcast. We will continue to bring up Warren Buffett quotes because Billy can never get enough of them.
This is true. Actually, you know what? We're going to do one whole episode on Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
All right? I think
that's this episode. No. I digress. We're going to bring it back on track. We're not just going to be talking about Billy's idol taking off into the sunset or sailing off into the sunset. We are going to bring it back on track, but I thought that was a nice little segue to throw it in.
It is not. Well done. Well, Andrew, we're going to talk about financial advice and specifically what does the first meeting look like with a financial advisor. So we obviously talk about advice and the benefits, and obviously we're huge advocates of it. But we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive here and talk about, okay, what are some of the things that we discuss with clients and what some of the things that they can expect us to talk about. We'll unpack that a little bit. We'll talk about the reasons why as well too. But yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to sort of get a peek behind the scenes in terms of what we're thinking when we are asking those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that there's a big misconception around, what it is that we do and what a financial advisor does. And I think that most people have the perception that we're effectively, and here I'm going to tie it in, but we're effectively a Warren Buffett. You're going in and you're just telling someone where to invest and you're trying to achieve a rate of return that's X and that's it. And that's a, aspect of the role. But in terms of what it is that a financial advisor does, it's actually very, very different. And a lot of those investment decisions like that are not necessarily in, selecting the assets like a Warren Buffett would, but selecting the asset manager or selecting the, allocation, or the big thing that a financial advisor does is around the strategy.
The way that I tend to elaborate on that, and you're absolutely right, is it's almost like, let's use a gym analogy, Andrew, right? So I've been away for a little bit. Today was the first morning that I've been in the gym for a while. So obviously that's going through my mind to get rid of some of the holiday pudding that's appeared around my midsection. So think about it like a personal trainer, where somebody would think that a personal trainer is just in there instructing them in the gym when they're doing the exercises, right? But it expands way beyond that. They could potentially ask you questions about your lifestyle, what you eat, do you drink, how much sleep are you getting, what type of lifestyle have you got? All of these factors, what are your goals? What is it that you're trying to achieve? So even though it's designed to appear and maximize your benefit in the gym, it's actually designed to achieve a whole heap of other stuff. And that's no different to financial planning when we ask the question. So I think a good place to start for us, it's not just about the numbers. It expands a lot further beyond that. And hopefully we unpack that, similar to like what I was describing with PT. So Andrew, if it's not just about the numbers, what's it about?
It's all about you. As cliche as that sounds, it's all about the client. It's all about a focus on what are the goals? What are you trying to achieve? What are the values that you want to stand for with, your strategy? What's your family situation like? What's your lifestyle like? What do you want your lifestyle to ultimately look like? It's not these are the numbers. This is what you have to do to maximize your wealth. It's the same for everyone, and that's it. It's how do you actually build a strategy? How do you actually build, something that's going to be tailored towards you and your family that works with what you're trying to achieve? And it's not about, someone being in a, particular age bracket. And so they're, on the same strategy or on the same goals. I mean, I talked to one client that's in their 30s and, they want to start diversifying the investments, build a platform and a base to be able to start springboarding their wealth creation and their success from a wealth planning side of things. And they're going to do that slowly and consistently over time while still, being able to meet all of their lifestyle goals. And then you meet another person that has very different goals. They want to be aggressive in their wealth creation. They want to take a significant amount of risk. They want to reduce their lifestyle as much as they possibly can, go hard for 10 years so that they can, do it a lot easier after that period of time is done. So someone that is, going to have one particular set of circumstances and set of goals is going to have a different strategy to someone that has a different circumstance and goals.
Yep. No,
and that will adapt over time.
And there's no right or wrong because everybody's different. And you're absolutely right. What you want as an individual, as a family today can change in 2 or 3 years' time. And we tend to see, not always, but we tend to see that those big changes tend to happen in terms of what you want to achieve in life, what you want it to look like when there's big life events. That seems to be the driver that tends to nudge us and really encourage us to do a lot deeper thinking and go, okay, actually, this has happened in a point in time. I want it to look like this rather than I want it to look like that. So how we unpack that as financial advisors, I mean, look, there's the obvious stuff, which, Andrew, I might let you talk about, the assets, income, liabilities, and expenses. But we dig a little bit, well, not a little bit deeper, we dig a lot deeper and ask questions around a whole range of stuff. It could be, and including, tell me details about your family. Have you got kids? Are you planning to have kids? What's the age of the kids? If you do have children, is there anything that we need to be aware of? Is there special needs that may cost a certain amount of money? Is there education requirements that you want to try and achieve? Is there goals that you've got in place that you want to tick the box for them, help pay for university or help get them into property when they're older? Talk about parents. Is there a potential inheritance at one particular point in time that you're expecting? Is it that your parents, may eventually end up living with you and you're going to need to financially support them? We talk about work. What's your job security like? What's the deployability of your skill set in the event that something goes wrong? How high is your job security? So based on all of that, we're trying to get a really deep understanding of the client's circumstance. Andrew, assets, liabilities, income, expenses.
I mean, look, that's the stuff that you're expecting to probably go into financial advice and expect that we're going to ask questions around that. Like, what assets do you have? How much debt do you have against those assets? How is it positioned? Can we maximize it? What's your income? What's the expectation around what your income is going to look like in the future? So not just now, but, as Billy alluded to, with someone going to take time off with parental leave, what impact is that ultimately going to have to the cash flow? What are your expenses? So are you overspending in certain areas where you're not actually getting a real and tangible benefit out of from a lifestyle side of things? Are there things that we can do to start maximizing your assets, bringing down debt, or potentially, are you in a position where you should be taking on debt and you don't have debt? Can we accelerate things further? And so even though you're having a discussion around assets and liabilities and income and expenses, it's not always just, maximize assets, keep debts down, and that's it. Sometimes it's how do we leverage this further? How do we do more? And how do we adjust it? And again, that's going to come down to comfort levels. It's going to come down to, how someone feels about a particular strategy, not just these are the numbers behind it.
Yeah, look, I'll give you a perfect example on that. I was talking to a client, an existing client, for a little while ago, a couple of months. Very, very, very high income earner. Basically wanted to know two things. One, when am I going to pay off my house? Expensive house, a lot of debt. And based on the main asset that we're using to build wealth, superannuation. And all he wanted to know was, how can I achieve a certain number around both of those things, whether it's time or dollar value, with the least amount of risk possible? Got the potential, got the capacity, has all of the attributes to be able to borrow and go more aggressive, and probably should mathematically, but doesn't feel the need to, because we're going to hit those targets that he's got in his mind. So it could also be just answering the question, am I going to be all right?
Yeah. And that question may change, right? So that, the amount of times that you sit in front of a client like that and you start down a particular path, and then, it's pay down my mortgage, make sure that I'm debt-free by retirement, and then superannuation kicks in and I'm going to live off my super. And there's a life event that happens and they say, oh shit, I don't want to work till I'm 60. I want to, have the option to retire by the time that I'm 50. So this particular strategy that I'm on, we need to pivot. And that's all about having a relationship with your financial advisor to unpack those goals and say, okay, things have changed. How do we adjust the strategy, and what do we do to make sure that we're now, hitting the new targets, the new set of goals? Is it achievable?
No, 100%. So getting a really broad understanding of a person's situation. What does it look like? Not only where they are now, but where they want to go and what they want to achieve, and helping unpack and navigate that is really the skill set of the advisor. And when that comes in, because it's not like you walk into a room with a financial advisor and you've got this conceptually mapped out in your mind. nobody has that, right?
Yep.
Or maybe 1 out of 100 potentially have that. But getting a really great understanding, because then we know what we're working with. Moving on from that, Andrew, what are the things that a client should typically bring when they have a meeting with us the first time?
Yeah, I mean, look, this should be discussed in, an introductory call.
Yep.
And so every advisor is going to have or every business is going to have a different process.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be worded up with, and what I like to, start off with in that introductory call is just getting a gauge around the client and what their goals are likely to be. Now, they may not have ever thought about that before. So sometimes there isn't much there, or there's more unpacking that needs to be done in the initial meeting. But really, having things like pay slips, having things like, your mortgage and loan balances, having things like, superannuation statements, insurance policies, a rough budget. If you don't have any of those things, usually I'm telling a client, I'll send you an email.
Yep.
These are the details, to bring along. Or what's even better is, rather than relying on, the financial advisor to have the experience and the knowledge to unpack and download all of that information, and then, start to formulate some strategies and some goals off the back end of it, send it early. Let me have a look at it. Let me get an understanding of your situation. That way, the time that you're spent in the meeting is in the meeting rather than just downloading information.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's fair to say that the greater the information, or the more accurate the information that we have, the more effective that conversation can be.
Yeah.
So a little bit of prep work does go a long, long way. We're quite fortunate these days that most of the information is available. If somebody is a little bit tech savvy or what have you, you can just jump into your apps or what have you and get all of that information straight away, which makes life definitely a lot easier. But a little bit of prep work does go a long way. The other thing that I tend to position with people when I'm talking about this is just have a think about what the future looks like for you. And I don't sort of put any boundaries around that. I give some clues around, financially, lifestyle, family, that sort of stuff. But just so they've given it a little bit of thinking around, what could potentially work for them. Because I tend to find that when there's a little bit of that, I can then grab that and then sort of dig a little bit deeper to try and get a better understanding of what that looks like, unpack that, and then how does that fit into, the prospective strategy that I'm going to put together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing that happens in a lot of these meetings is just some time in, dispelling some common myths that occur in a financial planning concept, or that sit around the financial advice space. Bills, what are some of the myths, the biggest ones that you unpack with a client when you either start in an initial meeting, or maybe even before you get to that stage of an initial meeting, and you're just having a conversation?
It's before you get to the meeting. I tend to find with most of them. The first one is, there's probably a few, but the biggest one that stands out is that the perception that people have to sit in front of a financial advisor, you need to be wealthy. Now,
that's like saying, to use your gym analogy,
I need to be healthy.
I need to be fit. A particular body shape before I see a personal trainer.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's why you see
and not to be confused with, I need to be wealthy versus I'm going to pay for the advice. There's a complete different mindset between the two. But actually what I tend to think works more effectively is that those people that, it's not even wealthy versus not wealthy. It's just, if you're not, what's wealthy, right? It's all a matter of perception in terms of how you perceive that. It's just the mindset, because I find that people that aren't wealthy get more out of it.
Yeah.
Simply because if somebody's wealthy, it's probably an opportunity for us to maximize the investments and maybe do some restructuring and stuff. But if you're not wealthy, then there's so much more that we tend to dig our teeth into. And when we look at the financial planning work that we do, or the financial advice work that we do, there's so much more that's done that probably hasn't been looked at or taken care of previously in the past.
Yeah.
So in terms of the impact that it has, I tend to think that those ones who are experiencing financial advice that don't have the level of wealth that they perceive to make them wealthy actually get more value out of the meetings than those clients that have wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that, and look, not every business is the same, and one financial advisor is different to another financial advisor, and one business is different to another business. But the financial advice landscape is governed by best interest duty. Now, portion of that is, or what that in actuality means, is that a financial advisor is required and needs to demonstrate this in their files, that the advice that they're giving is in the best interest of the client, and the fee that they're charging is still going to put the client in a better position. So the important thing to note in all of this is, yes, there have been times where we've sat in front of a client and we've said, look, I don't think that you're actually going to get the value out of me going through a fully fledged financial advice process. But that doesn't mean that having an initial consultation or having a meeting with a financial advisor is not worthwhile. In fact, it's probably more worthwhile, because you're sitting in that meeting, you're telling the client, hey, you need to work on this, 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 this. Once those things are taken care of, and once this is built to a particular point, then we can step in and maximize all of it. But you need to have some foundational skills. You need to have some foundational elements in a financial advice plan for it to be worthwhile. And these are the things that you need to do in order to do it. So a lot of the times you're walking out with a structure and a strategy without needing to ultimately pay for it, and with something that you can work on your own. So I think in those instances, it's actually more important to have financial advice.
Probably the next one that I see, it's that financial advice is all about investing, or it's all about a financial product. I see that and hear that all of the time. And obviously you alluded to some of that with best interest duty. But in terms of the stuff that we talk to clients about, I mean, look, work your way through it. You could start with the goal setting. It could be cash flow. It could be debt elimination strategies. It could be lending. It could be gearing. It could be investing. It could be trying to hit a particular level of wealth to achieve a certain goal. It could be retirement planning. It could be estate planning. There could be some Centrelink, some aged care, whole range of different stuff, not just about investing. And all of the time, it's about the strategy first. And then if we need a financial product in order to enact the strategy, then we'll recommend the product.
Yeah. And I think that it is important for people to know that a financial advisor doesn't get remunerated for, or doesn't receive a commission for recommending a particular product. So there isn't an incentive to recommend one product over another product or anything like that. That doesn't exist in financial advice anymore, and historically has in the past. But a financial advisor will only recommend the product if it is going to facilitate a particular goal or a particular thing that we're trying to achieve for a client.
The only one on that is the financial products that still exist that do pay commission is insurances. The insurance payment amount is streamlined across the industry, so there's no difference from a remuneration perspective whether we recommend insurer A versus insurer B. The commission rate they pay everybody is the same.
It's exactly like a mortgage broker.
It does not change in the slightest. So that's been standardized to take out any conflict, to say, hey, I'm going to go with insurer A rather than insurer B, because insurer A pay me more commission if the product gets placed. So that's completely out of it. And that's the reason why we keep going back and saying it's financial advice. It's financial advice, it's financial advice, it's financial advice. And if we need a product, we'll recommend one. Where the myth comes from is back in the day when financial advice was in its infancy, it was led by product. And usually it was sort of two main products: insurance products and it was an insurance product, but the advice piece was we're selling an insurance product to take care of some estate planning stuff. So it was actually flipped on its head. Same thing with superannuation. Whereas that was old world, it's been new world for a long period of time now. It's actually flipped on its head.
Yeah.
So advice comes first and product, if required, comes second.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. I think the other one that we hear all the time is, you're going to tell me to stop enjoying my life. And, you're going to put me on some strict budget, and I'm going to not be able to actually, go out to dinners, and I'm not going to be able to, go out with friends and do all of the things that bring me enjoyment. I think it's the opposite. And what tends to happen most of the time is that after you're having a meeting with a financial advisor or with 360 Financial, you're actually liberated to do so.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is, in the past, you're, spending money on things that bring you fulfillment and enjoyment, but you're not actually making a decision to do it. It's just happening. And that what can happen is there's an element of guilt associated with those purchases. When you're building a structured plan, you're saying it's not about eliminating these things. It's not about eliminating the things that bring you enjoyment, whether that is, having nice clothes, or whether that is, going on a holiday, or whether that's, all of the things that, bring some enjoyment out of your life. What you're doing is making a decision to do it. It's not just as a matter of course.
Yeah.
It's, okay, I've got money that's allocated to this, money that's allocated to that, money that's going to help, eliminate my mortgage, that's going to help build my investment, that I'm going to contribute to super. And I've got money that's, towards going on a holiday every year and making sure that I'm spending time with the family. I've got money that's allocated towards, going out and dining out, and money that's allocated towards, spending on, clothes and things that bring me enjoyment. But you're making a decision to do it rather than it just happening, and not knowing whether you're on track or off track. So if anything, I really think that it's a matter of, enjoying or getting enjoyment out of those things because you've allowed yourself to do it.
Yeah. No, and there's, it's kind of like the Marie Kondo, where you only buy things if they spark joy. I mean, hers was more about decluttering and stuff, but if you're more intentional with how you work with and treat your money, I think you get more value out of it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what tends to happen, is that it just focuses your attention. And, some of the things, I'll give you an example of something that I had yesterday, but I was talking to new parents, and we were coming up with a strategy and saying, okay, if we can put some money aside to invest for their child, it would result in having a decent amount of money when the child's in their early to mid-20s to put a deposit down on a house. And I said, look, that's the power of this and compounding and rates of return. But from your end, this is what it's going to take from a cash flow perspective. And they looked at this and they said, well, this here, it might be takeaway, a couple of coffees, whatever it is, each and every week. This here pales in absolute comparison compared to what we've been talking about. If all I have to do is sacrifice this in order to achieve that level of financial security and a leg up for my child when they, start their career, it's a no-brainer. So that level of clarity in terms of things around stop telling me to enjoy my life, it's laser focused and go, hang on a sec. All of this stuff was rubbish and noise in the grand scheme of things because we want to direct the money over here. And I think it's just perfect summation of what you're describing in terms of, thinking about being more intentional with your money, and actually the opposite happening.
Yeah.
Andrew, strategy kind of takes place right at the start from day one.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes this takes a couple of meetings. Sometimes it's really clear in the first meeting. Sometimes it's, not necessarily trying to develop the entire strategy. And this is one of the things that I and we like to do with a client is say, in the first meeting, you're setting out the foundation. You're setting out what the priorities are. And you're normally tackling, sometimes it's everything, but you're normally tackling the first step, maybe the second step. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be step 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But it's trying to take it one step at a time, not overwhelm yourself. We'll introduce all of the other things that, we'll consider, and we'll, add on to the strategy and add on to what we're trying to do. But we're not trying to overwhelm and say you've gone from a position of not having any plan and any strategy to where all of a sudden going to just build out your financial future from now to the next 30 years. And that's it. It's set in stone and you have to, stick to it. It's let's take the first step. Let's build the foundation and start to, springboard and continue on from there. But after the first meeting or after the first couple of meetings, there's usually a strategy loosely that we know that we're trying to achieve. From there, we're usually then starting to deploy and starting to look at, okay, these are going to be the timeframes to present the advice, because, you're never going to build everything in the first meeting. Normally the first meeting is you've got a loose idea on the strategy.
Yep.
Now we're going to go back, do research, formalize everything, and in X amount of time, depending on the complexity, we're going to sit down and run through a statement of advice, which is a document that outlines everything, what it is that we're doing, why it is that we're doing it, what the goal is that we're trying to achieve, what the strategy is going to be, what the products are, what the costs are, what the risks are, what the, absolutely everything.
What the trade-offs are.
Yeah, what the trade-offs are, absolutely everything in relation to the strategy. And then you're, implementing that strategy. And, if required, which usually there is, doing ongoing reviews to make sure that you're still on track or that your goals haven't changed. But usually after that first meeting, there's a loose idea of pretty much what it is that we're going to enact and the things that we're going to focus on in the first and second step.
Yeah, and just one thing that I want to call out as well too, because as a financial advisor, our obligation is different to other professionals. So you might sit in front of a solicitor or you might sit in front of your accountant and receive some advice from them. The majority of the time, they're talking you through that advice. Sometimes it may be written advice if there's a request for it or if it's complex enough. With financial advice, the way that financial advice is licensed in Australia, we have to deliver our advice in a written documentation called a statement of advice for a client. So when you engage with a financial advisor, that's what you will receive. It gets a little bit different if you're an existing client and what have you. There's other advice documents and things, but every time you engage with an advisor, it's an advice document that outlines all of those things that you were talking about. So it's not like you walk into a meeting similar to the way that you would with a solicitor or an accountant, and they may give you that answer verbally. With financial advice, we'll actually have it written, documented, and we'll run you through that document and talk you through why we've done certain things, why we've made certain decisions, why we've selected one course of action over another, but fundamentally different approach than what it is when you engage with other professionals, which sometimes it can be quite surprising for people when you do tell them that you have to go away, do some research, put an advice documentation together.
Yeah, exactly right. And then, Bills, you've done an advice document, you've put it all together, you've implemented the strategy, it's all happening, and then that's it? Never speak to an advisor again?
Advice is not one-off. It's dynamic.
It can be in very limited instances, but yeah.
Yeah, look, in some instances it may be the case. It could be, as an example, somebody needs some assistance with, say, Centrelink or aged care, but very rarely do I think it's set and forget, because life changes. Yeah. Life changes, circumstance changes, markets change. There's a whole range of things. And people change, your goals and objectives change as well too. And what we tend to find most of the time, as you're going through stuff, there's certain obvious points in time that certain things need to happen. So as an example, if you're a younger client, making sure that you've got a competitive mortgage as an example, and you're paying it off at a decent rate, and you've got a debt elimination strategy in place, probably resonates with most people. But then as you get a little bit older, you might focus your attention and go, okay, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel for the mortgage. Maybe I should start thinking about, I don't know, an investment property or maybe I should start thinking about putting money into superannuation. Or it could be, hey, the kids are finishing their schooling that I've been paying for, so I'm going to have some free cash flow. What do I do with that when they finish?
Yeah.
So all of this stuff just happens naturally as part of life. And, in our experience, we tend to find that we yield the best results when people are getting that reviewed and looked at.
Absolutely agree. And just because we obviously love analogies on this podcast, I'll to throw another analogy into it. It's like, what it's like is you are at, you're starting at a particular point and you've decided that I'm going to go on a hike and I'm going to get to, another point, right? You start here, you want to end up here. A initial transaction and an initial, consultation with an advisor is going to take into account, okay, you're here, you want to go there, we're going to point you in the right direction, we're going to take the first few steps, we're going to map out what the terrain is going to look like, and, we're going to work out how it is that we're actually going to get there. That's the initial consultation. That's the initial advice piece.
Mm-hmm.
But the weather changes, the terrain changes. You've got more people that have come along on that hike with you. You've got people that have left that hike with you. You're now considering, hey, I started in this particular direction and I took one step a little bit to the left, but I'm continuing the direction that I was going. And now that one misstep is going to put me in a completely different path to where I was originally going to go. Or, all of a sudden, I don't want to go there anymore. I actually want to go somewhere else. So anything can change in where things the only certainty in a strategy is that it will change. The market's going to change, your circumstances are going to change, your goals are going to change. And unless you're constantly reviewing it, unless you're making sure that you're still on track or reassessing whether, that goal is still really important, I just think that good advice, different story. There are instances where, you're just advising on a particular transaction, you're just advising on a particular thing that someone has a need for, and that's it. They don't want anything more other than that. It can happen in a transaction,
mm-hmm.
but really to get a benefit out of financial advice, it has to be an ongoing relationship. It has to be something that you're, engaging with on a regular basis.
Yeah. Andrew, I reckon that's
covered a lot of ground on that podcast.
We did. We've spoken for a while on this one, so hopefully there's a whole heap of value out of that. But look, warranted a different, deeper dive on there and more context around it. So hopefully we managed to get some questions answered. If anybody was thinking about what it is like to experience sitting in front of a financial advisor, if that sparked your interest, feel free to reach out to Andrew and myself. Details are in the show notes. Like and subscribe if you got a fair bit out of that. If you haven't already, share it with your family and friends. That'd be awesome as well too, because we're trying to grow the podcast.
Absolutely.
Andrew, thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot for the podcast again, Bills. And Warren, if you're listening, enjoy the retirement.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
The information in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your circumstances and seek professional advice before acting on any of the information provided. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of Acumen Financial Planning Proprietary Limited.